my life. Darrell Issa is a congressman from California, and here he is now. Good morning, Congressman Issa.
Don, I guess you're talking about a later guest, not about me as the most entertaining person you have on. Oh, well.
That's exactly right. So, you're a competent guest. So,
I'll try to be a competent guest. That's good enough for a politician. How you been?
I'm fine, sir. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Obviously, Washington is in the process of changing, and people are beginning to evaluate excess spending, and for somebody in my position, that's a good thing.
Do the Tea Party people like you?
Like me, yes. I'm not really one of them. It's part of the reality that once you're part of the establishment, no matter how much you try to bring down the man and do the things that they'd like to have and restore the Constitution, you name the issue, you're still an insider, and it's a party of outside to a great extent right now.
So, well, I was going to ask you who they were, but you just told me who they were. Well, for example, the New York Times, you have to consider the source, but I'm not one of those people who think it's the worst newspaper ever. But in there, and it is an editorial, but in their editorial this morning, they talk about how mainstream Republicans, and that would be like you and a few others, want to distance yourselves from people like this Christine O'Donnell, who was won the primary there in Delaware, and this Carl Palladino, who won the primary here in New York. Is that true?
Well, I think neither one of them would have been, if you will, the conventional candidate we would have chosen. But neither was I. I was a businessman who just got tired of seeing politics run by professional politicians and ran. So there are many of these candidates that we do want to embrace, that the young guns and a lot of others are made up of. People who for the first time said, I'm going to leave my job for a number of years and I'm going to come to Washington or maybe to Sacramento, wherever, and try to make a difference. So both types of candidates exist. Obviously, the Delaware race was one in which you had a extremely moderate, plenty of other names used for him, establishment candidate that people thought was the best to win a state in which Republicans conventionally have a hard time winning. And that's alienated a lot of Republicans. But, years ago when I got involved in the recall of Gray Davis, the establishment said, don't do it, it's messing up all our plans. And sometimes you look and say, well, wait a second, I don't want to hear about your plans. I want to hear about what's right or what's wrong. And the Tea Party, to a great extent, and bless their hearts, they do only want to hear about what's right or wrong. And government spending $1.4 trillion over and above the not too low, certainly I think high enough or too high taxes that we pay is wrong.
Of course, you recognize I wasn't talking about legitimate candidates like you who left, in your case, an enormously lucrative private sector gig to serve your country. I'm talking about these psychopaths who got these people.
Don, I absolutely agree with you. But, of course, when I first ran, the state treasurer, who was the son of the former Secretary of State, he was the establishment candidate, and there were names at least that bad about me. So, I think we have to evaluate every candidate individually. And when it comes to the Tea Party, it's not a unified organization. There are some scoundrels in the middle of it. There are probably some crazies that couldn't get in the front door of a conventional party. But there also are just some good, hardworking Americans who've had enough. And they've particularly had enough with Republicans who say we're for smaller government. And it seems like almost continuously since Richard Nixon, our smaller is always larger. Sometimes we're a little bit like ice. When we freeze, we get larger.
It's 20 minutes till the hour here in the Imus in the Morning program. We're talking with Congressman Darrell Issa. We developed the car alarm thing, right?
I did do car alarms, although some days I'm prouder of our home audio systems we produce.
Oh, okay.
At my old company, because the music is a little sweeter than a siren in the night.
I was just wondering if you're the guy we could blame for every time one of these things goes off. And you can't...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Once you're a politician, you're responsible for everything.
Yeah.
I always tell people I have 37 patents, and more than half of them relate to making the alarm not go off. The easy part is making it go off.
So you guys and you people in Congress who are not insane, have you counted Well, I forgot a way to ask this question. Well, it's an easy way. Do you have a head count on whether you think you can retake the House and maybe even the Senate, Republicans?
Well, I won't speak for the Senate, but I certainly I have a count of our Young Guns organization, people that we have selected that we think certainly are not crazy and could very well win, and in up to 70 cases could win, in up to 30 cases will win. So when people are doing counting, our low number is 30. That keeps us in the minority, but just barely, and our high number, if everything went right, puts us well in the majority. But, Don, it's not about whether we retake the majority or not. It's about what we do when the deck gets reshuffled and Republicans have a seat at the table. Will we use that seat at the table to do the things that need to be done to help America right itself, particularly the business community, get to running on all cylinders again? Because you can't raise taxes or lower taxes enough to offset people and companies that are simply going the wrong direction. We've got to get an economy that's running the right way, and that's the part gets lost with the politicians. You know, one group wants to do stimulus, the other group wants to do something else. At the end of the day, the people you see after you leave work, if their companies or their prospects to invest are going the right way, everything else in Washington, all the bickering and spending, will take care of itself. If they're not, we're just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
18 till the hour, talking with Congressman Darrell Issa in California. I noticed you've employed the phrase "young guns" a couple of times.
You noticed that little moniker. Well, it's a name we've put on all of our candidates. It's a recruiting program, Don. And
it's also the title. It's the title of this new book.
It is. Funny about that.
That Eric Cantor and who are the other two are involved in it?
Paul Ryan and California's Kevin McCarthy.
So is this a book plug that I've picked up?
Well, you know, not being the author, but being friends and supporters, the book is odd only because some people think the young guns are the three of them, and they're not all that young anymore. The fact is, it's about the people. It's about the next generation of Republicans that are being recruited and are running for office and are fit for duty, if you will. You know, the people you're talking about in some cases that won elections, they're not on the Young Guns list. To be on the Young Guns list, you do have to have an organization and a credible candidacy, and that's part of what the Republican National Committee should do, but the NRCC, in this case, our own in-house organization, has done. And Eric Cantor, to a great extent, sort of spearheaded that with his two partners, and they've done a great job. There's quite a group of us in Congress that were part of the organization, but at the end of the day, Pete Sessions and those folks have had to take what is ordinarily, okay, how do we find somebody to fill every slot, and instead said, you know, we don't have more than about 70 seats that are in play. How do we get the best people for it by going out and offering all of them a chance to look at it and telling them what they'd have to do to be credible candidates? But the book, as long as we're plugging it, Don, the book is really talking about the future. It's talking about pre-2000, post-2000, the time in which Republicans were simply the party that was trying to lower government with Bill Clinton, and then to a certain extent where we lost our way in 2001 with a new president who had big ideas.
Darrell, you're starting to lose me.
I'm sorry. Let me make it simple.
Yeah.
Read the book. You'll find out.
Well, the Cantor's going to be in here next week to plug this thing, but I don't know. I stopped.
What do you want to talk about instead, Don?
If you buy a new stereo system, 1 year from you coming, do you get a free copy of the book?
You know, I'm sure the company would make that promotion. I no longer can pitch for the company. What's important, though, Don, is that voters have to ask, coming up in this election, and this is the plug that does matter, don't look at whether somebody's a Republican or a Democrat. Look at whether they're going to take us in the right direction or the wrong direction. And I happen to think, for the most part, they're going to find Republicans who at least are trying to take us in the right direction. And to a certain extent, Democrats who say, well, you know, I'm improving, I've changed my ways. Well, the American people have a big decision, and that is, you know, are you better off today, you know, with the taxes that are in place, or are you going to be better off with a tax increase, particularly if it's you're a small business owner, and those issues I think are framing the debate, not just in the countryside, but I'm sure in the evenings in New York, where they probably don't like the Republican Party someday, but they're going, but I don't think I deserve a tax increase just because I had a good year.
If you guys take over the House, of course, as we were talking about, then probably Boehner will be Speaker, and he told, as you're well aware, Bob Schieffer on Sunday, that he was willing to compromise on the Bush tax cuts if he were forced to. So he's trying to walk that back now, but what do you think of that?
Well, the majority figures out what they're going to put on the floor, and we have to vote yes, no, or present, and present isn't good enough. So he probably was technically answering a question. We are going to support the proposition that you're already overtaxed.
Well, what does that mean, technically answering the question? I mean, he wasn't being
okay.
truthful, or?
He was technically answering the question. If they maneuvered to a question where he could either give some tax break or all, he was going to vote for the sum that he had a choice, but he wanted to hold the tax rate where it is.
Well, yeah, I did say that. Yeah.
But Don, I'll tell you, I am going to vote against any rule. I'm going to do everything I can to bring down a vote that tries to divide America into employer-employee, that tries to pretend that if you take the small businessman, or for that matter, the person who's got a piece of land that they've held for 30 years, and the year they sell it, they've got a gain of over $250,000, and somehow vilify them. I don't get it. The fact is that you cannot make all of us rich by bringing down the rich and trying to pretend that the poor will somehow be better off. Our problem today is that capital is sitting on the sidelines. If we start taxing and vilifying the rich, they'll find tax havens instead of investments. And the truth is, I want people with a lot of money to get up every morning saying it's worth my while to try to invest it, to try to put it into America. And as somebody who's been almost 10 years now, Don, in Washington, our biggest problem in our tax policy is it doesn't encourage Americans to invest in America. Now, that we ought to be changing. We ought to really sit down and say, what does it take for people to want to and be rewarded for creating American jobs here, including the old-fashioned kind, the kind where we actually made something.
Fortunately, we're out of time, so... But it's all...
Well, Don, thanks for having me on. Have me on at least 3 more times before the election if you can.
It's always nice to have you on the program, and thank you for being a good sport. Congressman Darrell Issa, California, 11 minutes till the hour.